All right, let's get right into it. For centuries, there was this one material that was just legendary. It was the peak of craftsmanship, a lost art that was part myth, part metallurgy. Damascus steel. Today we're going to try and unlock the mystery of how medieval smiths created something so advanced it stumped scientists right up until the modern age.
You know, this wasn't just any old steel. It was a legend forged in metal. I mean, just think about that for a second. A material that had two properties that should be complete opposites. It was incredibly hard, so it could hold a razor-sharp edge, but it was also flexible enough not to shatter. That combination, that was the holy grail for anyone making a sword.
And that's the real kicker here, isn't it? This wasn't cooked up in some high-tech lab with computers and clean rooms. No, this was forged in fire and sweat, using a secret that would eventually just vanish completely. So how on earth did they do it?
To really get the mystery, we first have to appreciate why this stuff was so revolutionary. It wasn't just a little bit better than other steels at the time. Oh no, it was on a whole other level.
Just look at the difference here. With regular steel, you have to make a choice. You can make it hard, but then it gets brittle and it can shatter. Or you can make it flexible, but then it won't hold a sharp edge for long. Damascus steel, it did both. It had this almost magical, self-sharpening quality happening at a microscopic level. And of course, that iconic, beautiful watered pattern, which, as we're about to see, was actually a huge clue to its secret.
So you've got this incredible technology. It's the envy of the entire world. And then, poof, it's just gone. The knowledge, the process, the whole art form vanished.
Take a look at this timeline. For almost 1,000 years, these blades are being made. The craft is passed down generation after generation, getting better and better until it hits its absolute peak in the 1600s. And then, in just a few decades, around 1750, it completely dies out. The recipe is lost. That's like the secret formula for Coca-Cola just disappearing from the planet overnight.
So what happened? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm of problems. The special ore they used, which came from India, it just ran out. And it turns out tiny specific impurities in that ore were a critical ingredient nobody knew about. At the same time, the chain of master to apprentice got broken. You see, this knowledge wasn't written down in a book. It was an art, an intuition, passed down in person. Once that chain broke, the knowledge was gone for good.
So for the next couple hundred years, scientists and blacksmiths try like crazy to recreate it, and every single one of them failed. Trying to reverse engineer Damascus steel became this huge challenge in materials science. They had the original blades, they could analyze them, but they just couldn't find the secret.
And here's why they couldn't find it. The answer was right there, inside the steel all along. But it was on a scale that was totally invisible. Not just to the naked eye, but even to the best microscopes they had back then. The secret was literally smaller than a wavelength of light.
It wasn't until we invented the electron microscope that we could finally see what was going on. See, instead of light, this thing uses a beam of electrons to look at things at the atomic level. And when scientists finally pointed one of these at a real Damascus blade, what they found was just astonishing.
Okay, this is the big reveal. The secret to Damascus steel wasn't just some clever forging trick. The medieval smiths were, completely and totally by accident, practicing nanotechnology.
Deep inside the steel, scientists found carbon nanotubes. These are these tiny, tube-shaped molecules made of pure carbon. And just to give you an idea of how incredible these are, they're one of the strongest materials ever discovered. Their strength-to-weight ratio is just off the charts compared to steel. And these ancient smiths were creating them in their forges without even knowing it.
But wait, there's more. They also found these nanowires, made of a substance called cementite, which is basically iron carbide. These little wires are unbelievably hard and resistant to wear. So you had a blade that was reinforced with super strong, flexible nanotubes and super hard, sharp nanowires. That was the source of its legendary contradictory powers.
So, the most important thing to get here is that this wasn't on purpose. It was an ancient recipe they'd perfected over hundreds of years. You had to start with that specific ore from India, the one with those little bits of vanadium and other elements that acted as catalysts. Then, you had to forge it in a very specific temperature range and then cool it down really slowly. That exact process allowed these incredible nanostructures to just build themselves inside the steel. And this is the most mind-bending part of the whole story. The Smiths had no clue what a carbon nanotube was. They didn't know anything about atoms or molecules. They worked by feel, by the sound of the hammer, by the color of the glowing metal, and by the traditions passed down to them. They had perfected a process without ever understanding the science behind it.
And that leads us to this really cool final idea, right? The difference between knowing how to do something and understanding why it actually works.
This really gets to the heart of it. The Damascus Smiths had profound knowledge. I mean, they could reliably make one of the most advanced materials on Earth, but they didn't have the scientific understanding of it. Theirs was a mastery of procedure, perfected through centuries of trial and error and tradition.
So, how did they know when they got it right? By looking at the blade. That famous watered pattern wasn't just for looks. It was the sign on the outside that all the amazing stuff on the nano level had formed correctly on the inside. That pattern was their quality control, their certificate of authenticity that told them, yep, the magic happened.
And that leaves us with a pretty wild final thought. If medieval blacksmiths could accidentally stumble into creating nanotechnology, what other secrets are hiding in plain sight in other ancient crafts or folk technologies? What kind of sophisticated science is buried in traditional medicines or ancient farming techniques or old ways of building things, just waiting for our modern tools to finally show us the understanding behind all that incredible knowledge?